Hello everyone, here's Maria Carmo in the channel 369, and today I have Sebastien here with us from Emurgo, and we are gonna talk a little bit about news and curiosities that we want to know about Sebastien. How are you today, Sebastien?
Hello, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. You know, I'm hanging around with the smartest guys in town, and one of them is you. I just want to say how much the community appreciate your work.
Yeah, thank you very much. For those who don't know, who maybe are watching this and haven't seen me before, my name is Sebastian, and I'm the co-VP of Engineering and Cardano Project Manager at Emurgo. And Emurgo is one of the companies behind the Cardano project.
Cool. Would you tell us a little bit of your background? I don't remember seeing you talking about it, like which university you go to and what you're doing until you come to Emurgo.
Yeah, so I was born in Canada, and I grew up on the West Coast in a city called Victoria, which is near Vancouver. And I went to university there, to a university called the University of Victoria. So it's not a huge university, but it's not a small university. It's kind of medium sized. And there I studied both math and computer science. And at the time I was, interested in math as a kind of hobby, and computer science was going to be kind of, where I was going to go for a job. And I was doing kind of machine learning, natural language processing, this kind of stuff. And so when I graduated, I went to go work at Microsoft, where I was working on Bing, which is a search engine by Microsoft. And I was working on a team to kind of implement some of the engineering side of their natural language processing model. So I was working there for about a year and a half, and then I got an offer from Emurgo to come work with them in Japan. And the reason why is because at the time I was already involved in the Cardano community, but just during my spare time. So they knew I knew Cardano. And then obviously I was working as an engineer, so they knew I could code. And also I speak Japanese, and Emurgo is originally a Japanese company. So that's also a skill they were looking for. So based off these kind of three things, they thought I would be a good fit for their position in Japan. This is just when they were starting the R&D team. So I was the second engineer to join. And so I flew to Japan to meet the team at Emurgo and talk to them. And that's when we started working on Yoroi. And I've been in Japan ever since.
Oh, this is really cool, your journey. Um, I'm very curious, how long took you to learn Japanese like? You know, it's a very tough language.
Yeah, I started studying in university. I was not taking courses, but it was kind of a way to meet friends and socialize. So as I mentioned, I grew up on the west coast of Canada, so there's a large Asian population there, not just Japanese, but of many kinds. And so I spent some time learning Mandarin, some time learning Japanese, and I felt like I really enjoyed learning Japanese, and it's really easy to meet people and make friends. And that's kind of my motivation to keep studying. So many days of the week, I would go to language conversation practice or these kinds of events, and meet new people and make friends. And so after doing that for many years, my Japanese level kept increasing, and based off of that, I started making some videos in Japanese on my YouTube channel a long time ago about Cardano. And my Japanese is not perfect, but it's at least understandable, and so that's how Amerigo kind of found me and knew kind of approximately where I was at for my Japanese level, which is why they were okay with bringing me on board with that. So I'll see it, learning a language, it takes a long time. So I don't know the exact time I've spent learning, but something like 8 years on and off. And, even to this day, my Japanese is not perfect. So every now and then I learn a new word and so on, and I try and keep my level up. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun.
It's like a journey, like meeting people and talking about different
Yeah.
subjects. I started learning English, I was 32, and it's a bit hard when you are older. If I knew, I would like start learning when I was a teenager, you know. But I know I do my best, but sure, I make mistakes as well, you know.
Yeah, well, it's since I live in Japan now, it's also I have a lot of motivation to keep studying because obviously I use it basically every day. So
What is your favorite word? I know we have favorite words, and there are words that I still can't say the word because it's hard. What is the word that you like the most and the one that's most difficult to say?
Like the word I like the most. That's a tough one. I've always liked the word ambulance in Japanese. Kyusha. I think it's
Uh,
kind of a cute word. The word that's hardest to say,
mm,
maybe sendo, which is like a train track. I feel like the R pronunciation followed by like a N followed by an R is kind
mhm.
of a tricky pronunciation. So that's maybe the hardest one.
The sound of DH in English is the hard one for us because we don't have this word in Portuguese. Like it took me a long time to pronounce words a little bit better. The other curiosity I have about you is how did you create your hub in Japan? Can you tell us about your experience, how it's going? Could you give us any tip how to do it? Because people would like to do the same around the world, and I think you are the right person to ask.
All right, so some people watching this may not be familiar with Cardano hubs and what is a hub. So this basically is an idea that Charles talked about in one of his videos. And the core concept is that the Cardano Foundation exists as an entity to, promote the Cardano ecosystem and so on. But the reality is they're based in Switzerland. And as such, they have to spend a lot of their time, managing the specific jurisdiction they're in. And they can't possibly know every country and every community. It's just not possible, right? And so it makes sense for every community to have its own kind of hub, in a sense, a mini foundation where the people there are very familiar with the local issues and what needs to be done for their own community. And so Charles, in his video, talks about, kind of some stuff they could do and the idea. And he says that it'd be nice if we had, hubs in many of the large centers to start, and we try and expand this concept going forward. And so Japan has always been a large community in Cardano, both because the pre-sale happened in Japan, but also because we've continued to put effort into the Japanese community by translating content into Japanese and having a presence in Japan and so on. And so because of that, we already have many active members here. And these members run stake pools, they do meetups, they do various activities in Japan. And so we already have multiple ambassadors here and so on. But it's never been necessarily organized under one banner. Everybody is kind of doing their own activities. And this idea of a Cardano hub was kind of a good excuse to take all the talent we have, the people we already have already doing work, and kind of try and unite between behind some banner. And that's what we're kind of hoping the Cardano hub will be. Now, obviously, setting up an actual NPO or NGO, some sort of legal entity to be a Cardano hub it's a whole other story, because that's requires quite a lot of work and money, and I'm not sure if we're at that point, and I think most communities out there are not at that point. But the first step is just coming up with a banner and having people in the existing community inside the country really run that banner. And if people are interested and it takes off, then obviously then you could look into setting up an actual legal entity if that makes sense. So in Japan, we already have people, as I mentioned, and now we're just trying to figure out, does it make sense to everybody operate under one banner? What does that look like? What benefits are there actually to doing this? And if we set up some sort of Cardano hub, we know what rules do we want for this Cardano hub, because eventually if it grows, then the idea is there'd be some sort of representative of the Cardano hub that may speak on behalf of the community if there's ever a need on the Cardano Foundation side. And ideally, these would be some sort of elected position, somehow elected by the community. But it's not clear how would you do the elections. are stake pool operators allowed to run for a board position on the Cardano hub, or would that be a conflict of interest because it'd be kind of promoting their pools? So there's a lot of, nuanced discussions like this that you have to have and figure out, what do people see as the potential of a Cardano hub, and, what rules would have to govern this Cardano hub. And so we already had a meeting both between ambassadors in Japan and the general public to see if people are interested in this idea and what their vision of a Cardano hub in Japan would be. And this is just getting started, so we'll see how far this goes and how much interest there is. And, we may start with one Cardano hub for Japan in general as a country. We may want to split it down further. For example, we could have a Cardano hub in Tokyo and have a different Cardano hub in Osaka, which is a different large city in Japan. So, there's no clear definition on the area or the scope that Cardano hub has to be. And so there's going to be a lot of decision making. Maybe decision making is not the right term. Maybe consensus making is the right term.
Do you
Talking
have
with people in
a
the community.
Do you have like a software or app or something that you use, or any cost in the beginning? How do you share the cost? Because you see the Meetup app have a cost, and few other tools that you have to use have a cost. How you cover it? How you dealing with it?
Yeah, so the fortunate thing is that inside the Japanese community, we already have ambassadors. Ambassadors earn a certain amount of rewards for their work. Let's see, it's not, I think you're an ambassador also, so you may know that it's not a, amount to live off of, but it's a certain amount. And so because of that, we have these meetup ambassadors. We use the funds they receive from the CF to cover part of the meetup cost. Obviously, it doesn't cover the full cost, but it covers part of it. And the rest, they usually cover it themselves. So people tend to put out their own money to cover the cost of running these things. And part of the stuff that I'm doing for the Cardano hub, I'm also just financing myself. So it could be that in the future, maybe there's some sort of decided way to set up a Cardano hub, and maybe the Cardano Foundation at that time could set up a more structured path with maybe some funding for setting stuff up. But right now, a lot of the work and the funding is just coming from community members who are passionate about this and are okay with putting down a small amount of money to help grow the local community.
I am funding my meetups myself as well, because I think it's so important to have a place where people can meet and have a safe place to learn without any trolls or any bullying. People is just there and they ask the questions they want to ask us and learn with us. I think it's so great what you are doing, and I love the passion. Like, people put their own money and you put all this together to serve the community as best we can. It's amazing what you're doing. And the other questions I have is, what is the secret to have a 5-star proposal in Catalyst? Because you're the one to get 5 stars. When I saw it, I need to ask that.
Yeah, so the proposal that we put out on Catalyst, if people haven't seen it, is to build a message signing specification for Cardano. And the reason we thought this was useful is because we would like for users to be able to prove they have a certain balance on Yoroi. And this would be useful, for example, for some sort of airdrop, right? So imagine you want to give an airdrop to everybody who owns a certain amount of tokens on Cardano. To do that, you want to prove that somebody owns the tokens, right? And so one way you could prove the ownership of the tokens is you sign with the private key that owns these tokens, and you sign a message. And so this is kind of standard cryptography. But the question is, okay, if you have to sign a message, how do you represent that data format in an agreed upon way so that you could build a library to do this, and anybody who wants to do an airdrop doesn't have to recode this from scratch. They could just use this library. So I use airdrop as one example, but there's many other things you could do. For example, you could build a social media website where you can only log in if you own more than 10 ADA, for example. And so that might be an interesting use case. So this is meant for stuff that doesn't require like on-chain functionality, just proof that you own a certain token or proof that you own a certain amount of ADA. And so the proposal details how we think this should be done and the data format we suggest for this. And if the proposal is funded, then we would build this functionality and add it to Yoroi. So in Yoroi, you would have a message signing tab where you can sign arbitrary messages. Now, I think part of the reason it got 5 stars is because there's a certain reputation behind it. So obviously, this is backed by Emurgo. And so people trust us to actually deliver if we get the funding. And people even trust us more because we actually started the work before the Catalyst proposal. So we already wrote the Cardano improvement proposal for the standard. So if people want to know, well, how are they actually going to do this? They can actually read the full documentation of exactly what we plan to do. And the other thing is that we asked for a really small amount of ADA. So I forget how much ADA we asked for exactly, but it was something like the equivalent of $500, something fairly small for the whole proposal. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to ask for some amount of ADA to kind of normalize the idea that IOSK and Emurgo and maybe with Cardano Foundation and so on will be funded by Catalyst in the future for certain projects. But we didn't want to compete too much with the other existing proposals by the community. Because obviously for the first few rounds of Catalyst, there's not that much ADA available for everybody. There's more proposals than there's ADA to go around. So we figured this was kind of a good amount that was small enough that people will be okay with it, but large enough that people get the idea that this is how we want to get started, and we may propose some more stuff in the future with more appropriate costs.
Did you wrote the proposal yourself?
Yeah. So I wrote the proposal. I submitted the Cardano proof proposal, and then Emurgo funded the audit of the proposal also.
Oh, that's really
nice. And then we have one of our team members at Emurgo is a Rust engineer, and so they're working on implementing the proposal itself as a Rust library.
Really cool. I think it was great the fact that you got 5-star. I was looking and reading it. I said, how can I get 5-star? Maybe next time. I don't think I'm going to have a proposal myself, but I probably will support few proposals in Fund 3. But you're right, the fund is not big. I think too much proposal for little money. But I think the way that you didn't go for much money and you did just dipping in the water and see how it goes, I think is a very, very good attitude. And I hope you come around.
And we can do that at Emurgo, but obviously other community members may not have that leeway. But the other thing is that there's a lot of Catalyst proposals right now, which are more on the marketing side and community building side. But I think right now for Catalyst, there's more appetite for technical projects that build the technical capabilities of Cardano. So if you look at the proposals getting the most traction right now, a lot of them are technical proposals. And for Fund 3, also the 2 topics for the fund are both technical proposals. So I think there may be some room for something more on the community building and marketing side right now, but I wouldn't say it's that big. I think right now people are wanting to put money into building out the technical capabilities. So if somebody wants to make a proposal for Fund 3, that's what I would suggest. Try and find something more on the tech side than on the marketing side. And if you want to do something more on the marketing side, you may have to wait for a future funding round.
And maybe if your proposal is too expensive, maybe it will be a better opportunity the next round. I always say to people, if you have a good proposal, but take much money, just come around the next fund, and then we can fund the small proposals now and the bigger as the funding goes on and on and on. There is another questions I got from someone from the community was, will Yoroi deliver a Web2 browser connection with dApps that will have the same function as MetaMask?
Yeah, and we're actually working on that right now. So the reason we're working on this is because Cardano is having smart contracts come later this year, but we're also working closely with a different project called Ergo. And Ergo is a project that is a proof of work project, so it's not quite the same as Cardano, but they have a similar idea for how smart contracts work. And the people who started Ergo also worked for IHK as a researcher there, so we have a good connection and history with them. And so we're working with them to implement some smart contracts that we want to launch on Cardano in the future. For example, we've already shipped an Oracle system on Ergo, and now we're working on a stablecoin project for Ergo. And these are both projects that we want to launch on Cardano once Plutus smart contracts are available. And so as a kind of testing ground, we're already releasing these on Ergo. And to make these user-friendly, we're also working on this kind of MetaMask-like functionality for the Yoroi extension. And so we're actively working on it, and we'll hopefully have something fairly soon, kind of a demo, and we'll release the demo as a video on YouTube and so on. And you'll be able to see Yoroi used not only as a wallet, but also as a dApp bridge for interacting with websites. Now, the way that Yoroi works slightly different from other MetaMask-like extensions is that this functionality for injecting into websites is optional. And the reason we wanted to design it this way is because the reason a lot of people like Yoroi is for the safety you get from having it kind of locked into your browser. So the way browser extensions work is that websites can't interact with browser extensions, and other browser extensions can't interact with browser extensions. It's locked down, and it's not a sandbox, and nothing else can interact with it. And that gives you a lot of confidence in the security and privacy of any funds you put inside the Yoroi extension. But if we start building a kind of bridge to connect it to websites and dApps, you're kind of opening the door for something to go wrong, right? And so obviously if you trust the dApps you're using, then that's no problem. But we felt that some users may want to keep the kind of locked down version of Yoroi and not have any kind of dApp bridge or this kind of functionality. And so the way we plan to do it is that for every currency that Yoroi supports, there'll be something we're going to call a connector. And it's going to be something that you download separately. So once you download the Yoroi extension and you create, Cardano wallet, we'll have a prompt like, hey, do you want to download a Yoroi Ergo connector or a Yoroi Cardano connector, which will allow you to interact with smart contracts, yes or no? And if you press yes, then you'll download this additional functionality. And we thought this is a good way to keep the safety of Yoroi that people are familiar with, while also giving users the opportunity to opt in to this smart contract functionality for dApps.
Very interesting. So many things to come as soon we get malware and Plutus and all these platforms. And is there anything else you're working on that would you like to tell us? Some secrets, some nuggets?
Yeah, so a lot of the work we're doing on the Cardano side is always trying to keep up with the changes in the protocol. So right now, the next protocol upgrade is Mary, which adds multi-asset support to Cardano. So now we're working to upgrade our Rust library and the Yoroi extension, Yoroi Mobile, to work with this update for Cardano. And I'm sure after that, we'll be busy with, the Plutus support and so on. So because Cardano is still very much a blockchain in development, we're constantly working to improve our systems to work well with all the up-to-date functionality. Whenever we have spare time, we try and work on other features like the message signing specification I mentioned earlier. But we tend to have a fairly limited amount of time to work on these extra functionality, and a lot of our time is spent on the core stuff. So for example, Catalyst is something that we're also working on right now, Catalyst support inside Yoroi. And so that's something that we'll have for round 3 of the funding for Catalyst. And this is, something that we need to do because Cardano keeps evolving, so it's something that we have to work on. And the MetaMask like functionality is something that we have to work on to keep up to date with the Cardano functionality. So keeping up to date with Cardano functionality has always been our number one priority, and any extra feature is kind of nice to have. So we're working on Catalyst, we're working on Mirror support, we're working on this MetaMask-like functionality. We're also working on actual dApps for people to use. So as I mentioned, this Oracle system and this stablecoin. So there's a lot coming up. And we tend to have these kind of surprise, small features here and there that we kind of add in when we have the time.
That's really cool. And Sebastien, I think I finished my questions. I don't have any more questions. And I just would like to say thank you for your time and thank you for your explanation and for all your work. You said so many stuff. I don't know how you fit everything in 24 hours a day. It sounds to me that you are really, really busy at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work, but also I'm passionate about Cardano and what we're doing and the vision. And so, I really enjoy the work I'm doing, and I enjoy the interaction with the community. And so I love coming on these podcasts and shows run by the community and help growing these projects. Because as you know, getting podcast started is always the hardest parts. And so I love coming on these and helping people get started and get more involved with the Cardano community. So if anybody's watching this and they have their own YouTube channel, their own social media accounts that they want to try and grow, definitely reach out to me, and I'd love to help you get more involved in the Cardano community if there's something I can do for you.
Sebastien, you make me so proud to be in this community because we are helping out people all the time. Thank you very much for your time, and I see you soon.